Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will discuss a paper called Visual ChatGPT. So first of all, this is a huge milestone in the history of AI and machine learning. And a lot of folks are also saying that this is as big as something called industrial revolution, and it's going to change multiple industries if this technology becomes more mature. So let's look at what is the core of this technology and what are the fundamental properties it's bringing on the table. So before we dive into the paper, we need to learn a couple of important concepts in NLP. First concept we need to look at is the concept of large language models. Now, this concept has become very popular lately. Let's say if you have a sentence, the cat sat on the table. Now, the idea of a language model essentially is that, say, if I cut out certain words from this sentence, can I use the rest of the words to reproduce or fill in the blank this particular word which I've cut out from this sentence? So that's the core idea of a language model, where you're trying to regenerate certain missing words or missing tokens from the sentence, and that's how the whole language model gets trained. Now, the idea of large language model essentially is that when you train this on an entire corpus of the whole web, then it becomes like a large language model. The other concept which we need to look at is the concept of what is called chat GPT. GPT essentially is a chatbot or a conversational agent with which you can talk to. So, for example, with to ChatGPT, you can answer a question, and it will look at all the training data and all the corpus, which is trained using a technology called Instruct GPT, which is essentially you can give feedback to the model, and the model can essentially allow you to give ask follow-up question on the questions which you have asked before, which is extremely useful. Now, one of the limitations of ChatGPT is that it is only a language-based model. So it is trained only using the human language or text data as an input, and it cannot handle the vision information. That's where this paper on Visual ChatGPT comes into. Now, before we dive into this paper, the other concept which we need to look at is the concept of visual foundation models. Now, this is a very important concept, right? So, essentially, the idea is that it's a collection of various vision based models. Now, there have been several models or vision models which have came out recently. So, for example, the first model which have become very popular, it's called Stable Diffusion. Now, Stable Diffusion became popular because it has capabilities from to generate an image from a text input. So, for example, you can describe a text input, and the Stable Diffusion model can take the text input and generate an image using the description you have described in the text. Now, the similar other model, which is very popular, which is called the blip model. Now, this model can take an input image. So, for example, you can give it an image of a cat, and it can describe that image into a summary. So these are the models which have become very popular lately. And the idea is that can we make a collection of all these models and make a building block called visual foundation models? Now, this is where the whole idea of Visual ChatGPT comes in. Now, the Visual ChatGPT essentially is an extension of ChatGPT, and the idea is that why can't we have a conversational agent which can also handle text but can also handle image input as well? Now, that's the basic property. The other property which we want to have is that can this chat agent have access to various visual foundation models, and it can pick and choose that given my text query, which models among my various models I need to choose. So that's the second property I need to have. The third property which I need is that can this model take my feedback? So, for example, let's say if I have an image and I want to first of all, let's say, reduce some noise from the image. So there could be some noise reduction which I want. And let's say if I want to change certain colors in this image, so change some colors in the image. Now, can I make a chatbot which can take these instructions and do a step-by-step process and choose different models for different tasks and generate a final image using my different feedback? So that's exactly the idea which have been proposed in this paper. So if we look at this diagram, right? So this diagram summarizes this whole concept very nicely. So essentially, as you can see, you have an input query. So for example, we are giving an image as input, and we are asking it to sort of change the color of this image and also make it a bit cartoony. So that's the input prompt. Now what is happening is that this image along with the text query is going to the prompt manager. Now prompt manager, what it's doing is it's taking the input query, processing the input query, and then choosing the right kind of model it needs to choose to process this and generating the final outcome. So essentially it's trying to take into account both the language input and the vision input, and then try to process the query for the user and then generating the final outcome. And as you can see, right, this is extremely powerful. Now the second thing which we need to look at, right, so as I already mentioned, we already have a lot of foundation models. So we have various models which have been proposed lately for different tasks between images and text. Now, why can't we train a single model which can be multimodal model, which can handle multiple modalities at once? So this could be one of the questions somebody can ask, that why can't we just train a single model which can handle multiple modalities together? Now, there are a couple of challenges with that. So, first of all, the first challenge is that training these models require a large computational input. So, you need to have a large computational budget to train such a model. The second limitation is that it's extremely expensive to train these kinds of models. The third limitation, which is in this scenario, is that what if you tomorrow comes and you say that, okay, you have a model for text plus images, but now I need a model which can also handle, let's say, a video input or an audio input. Now as you can see, right, this becomes extremely complicated and extremely limited in a way, right? Now that's where we need a slightly different idea, and that's where the whole idea of visual chat GPT comes in, where instead of training a single model which can handle multiple modalities, why can't we have a model which can have, let's say, a block of models, so which is called visual foundation models, so which can have, let's say, hundreds of models, and we can have then a model manager. So let's say we have a model manager, and this model manager can potentially take my input query and then figure it out that which model will be the best suited for my input query, process my input, so it can take my input, let's say image, process my input with the right, let's say for a certain query, let's say model 40 is the right model, so it chooses model 40, so it takes model 40, processes my image, and then generates my output. So this is what I want, right? So that's where the whole idea of visual chat GPT comes in, where you can tell the chatbot that what exactly I want, and then the chatbot can decide which models among my hundreds of models uh, I can choose from, right? So if we go back to this diagram, right? So you want a couple of capabilities in your visual chatbot. So essentially, you want it to handle like different kinds of inputs. So you want it to handle the text input, but you also want it to handle the image input. You will also want it to sort of have the capability to convert into modalities, right? So handle, let's say, image to text or text to image. And you also want it to have the capability to keep the history. So for example, there could be a scenario where you want to transform the image, let's say, from one modality. So for example, you have an input image, you want to remove the noise from it, and then you want to do some sort of color conversion. And as you can see in this kind of scenario, you also want to keep the historical information of what exactly happened in the past so that the model can take the right decision in terms of what to do next. Now, to dive deeper a bit, right, we can look at the very detailed diagram which is presented in figure 2 of this paper, where they have given an example of a sofa where you want to have a sofa of image of a sofa, and you want to convert that sofa into a different